And you can't even drive? I can. Are you stupid, eh? Are you a stupid fool? Well, why can't you drive then? You can't even drive! A bit grey today, isn't it?
I'm here. Welcome. I've got a can of root beer and I'm ready for part 2 of Bob Dylan. Sorry, it was delayed a week and then it was delayed an hour. Mrs. AA had to go to the dentist. That couldn't be helped. And last week we had to we were away last week essentially, and I just couldn't squeeze Dylan in as much as I love him. However, though a lot of people really appreciated the first part, my aim is to get all the way to Rough and Rowdy Ways, his last album in 2020. But there's an awful lot of material to cover. So without further ado, let's just get straight in. I'll just say right at the top, I appreciate all of the people who buy the Trivium and Foundations of Economics. If you are looking to level up your skills and so on, do buy those courses, because it very much supports me and gives me the time to do passion projects like this. I'm not doing streams like this for money, but I do make the courses for money. So also, I have noticed some people, maybe you don't want to do a course, or maybe you don't have the money. You can support the channel in other ways, like by joining it, becoming a channel member. You get access to all the archives that way, or you can just buy a mug if you click on the merch. Click on the merch section. So I will get that out of the way, because we're going to be going straight through here. Even if it takes 3 hours, I'm determined to get as far in as we can. I am also taking an extremely powerless decision, which is I feel like we need to listen to some of the songs, and I realize that Dylan's record company is incredibly hot on copyright. So I'm going to risk this stream being mute a number of times, because I feel like, especially when we're getting into the later period of Dylan, last time we were covering the 60s albums, I feel like everybody at least has listened to, Highway 61, or, his 60s classic output at least once. Even if you know nothing else about Dylan, you've heard Like a Rolling Stone. However, much of my appreciation of him as an artist comes from everything else he did, especially in the past 20 years or so. And so I feel like people are less aware of that material, and I want to play some of it. Also, throughout this, an enduring feature of Dylan is that he often leaves very good songs off his albums, or sometimes he uses a take and there's a much better alternative take, that you can find on the Bootleg series or elsewhere. And I want to play some of those alternative versions as well. I do realize I'm taking a risk with it. I don't think it'll get my channel removed or anything like that, but it could get the I have seen it before when we were doing Postman Pat on Deepest Law. Postman Pat nuked the stream. But I honestly feel like when we're talking about Dylan, it's not just about the lyrics; it's about the performance, and you have to see some of these performances to understand what I'm talking about. So I've taken the executive decision to do that. The reason I mention this up front is because if the stream disappears, okay, either stick with it and it will come back, okay, after I stop playing the song. You just have to wait a few moments, or if it completely disappears, I'll have to just restart the stream. Okay, so just bear with me. Okay, so where we left off, we had reached New Morning in 1970, And we're about to enter into a little period here in the early 70s, which is probably my least favorite, and certainly the least interesting period of Dylan's career from my perspective. So he goes a bit quiet after New Morning, and the next thing he does is the soundtrack for Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, which is technically his 12th studio album. And if you remember, I wrote a guide about a decade ago, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you what I wrote a decade ago and then update it with any other thoughts if I think it's necessary. Okay, I'm just going to double check to see if people can hear me. Here we go. Okay, I mean, the thing is, I don't think it will get. People are worried about copyright. It won't get an actual strike, but it might get the stream taken down. You know, they just say, oh, you know, most of the time though, they just say, we'll take the money, right? I don't care about the ad revenue from this stream. So Bob Dylan can have the ad revenue as far as I care. But we'll see what happens. Okay. So anyway, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. I wrote, I never know what to do with soundtracks in these things, but officially this seems to count as Dylan's 12th studio album, so I'll count it. Dylan was very quiet in the period between New Morning and this. He appeared at George Harrison's concert for Bangladesh in 1971, released the very seldom talked about single George Jackson, which is kind of a throwback to times they are changing kind of era. Like I said last time, you'll find a lot of these one-off singles, B-sides and so on a very useful album called Sidetracks, and I believe George Jackson's on there. So, you know, you'll find them in other places too, but Sidetracks is the only one I know of that puts them all in one place. The old 1985 box set Biograph has a lot of them as well. Whether it's got George Jackson on it, I can't remember from the top of my head, but Sidetracks certainly does. And that was about it, basically. And then I'm not totally sure how it came to be that Dylan wrote the soundtrack for and acted in Sam Peckinpah's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, but he did. There is, of course, one towering standout track from the album, which is Knocking on Heaven's Door. Another Dylan. I won't play that because I assume most people will have heard Knocking on Heaven's Door at least once, or at the very least, because you were born in the Ashes, you probably know the version by Axl Rose, you know, with the Guns N' Roses Knocking on Heaven's Door. But you know, that's as good a song as he'd ever write, as well as one of his best ever vocal performances. Dylan did not make many instrumentals in his career. I mean, I can think of there's one that was it Nashville Brag or something on Nashville Skyline. There's one on there, but there are plenty of instrumentals on this album because it's literally a soundtrack. The best of those instrumentals, in my view, is called Final Theme, which is a haunting piece featuring a pretty ace recorder studio. And this whole album really is an attempt to recapture the sound of the Old West. And within the context of that film, it works very well. I think the three Billy songs are pretty throwaway. And as a standalone piece, this soundtrack is mildly diverting at best and is a rather minor work in the Dylan canon. And I don't have much else to add to what I wrote 10 years ago. So moving swiftly on, I'm not going to linger on less interesting periods because we may be taking a lot longer when we get to some of the big works. I anticipate a major slowing down as we get to the mid 70s and then into the Christian era as well. So we'll just very quickly cover Dylan from 1973, easily Dylan's worst album. 10 years ago, I wrote, in 1973, Dylan left Columbia Records to join Asylum. So Columbia cobbled together this bunch of outtakes from Self-Portrait and New Morning and released it as an album with no input from Dylan himself as a kind of punishment. It's mostly shambolic cover versions of old standards, including the shittest version of Joni Mitchell's Big Yellow Taxi that you'll ever hear. Although this is truly abysmal, it's not impossible to listen to because it features quite pleasant poppy production throughout. Some people like to listen to this album for comedy's sake, but in my view, there's nothing funny here at all. It's proper crap. And again, I don't really see, unless you're like, even if you're massively into Dylan, there's probably like, there's at least 20 bootleg kind of albums to listen to before you'd, have to waste time on listening to Dylan from 1973. So nothing to write home about there at all. And then we have Planet Waves from 1974. And I've just written, for whatever reason, Dylan's only album for Geffen's, David Geffen's Asylum label, holds the least interest for me as a fan, possibly of any album of his. Like I was saying, this whole period here, like after New Morning and before Blood on the Tracks, I don't know what it is. There's just nothing going on, really. In fact, there's one suite of songs which I'll draw your attention to in a second, which is probably more essential than anything here. This period around 73 and 74 in general is just a bit rubbish. Now, some fans love this, but it holds very little appeal for me. The production is incredibly clean and middle of the road, or I wrote MOR back then. It almost feels like Dylan for the charts at times. This is the kind of Bob Dylan that fans of Dire Straits can like. He would never be as bland and uninteresting as this again in his career, if you ask me. Even at his worst moments after this, it's at least not boring like this is. Furthermore, I am not much of a fan of the band, and they are all over this album. In fact, it's Planet Waves is attributed to Bob Dylan and the band. Forever Young is a good song, although not one of my favorites. For some reason, there are two versions of Forever Young back to back on this. The slow one, which most people know, and a fast one. Incidentally, that fast version was remixed by will.i.am on a Pepsi advert around that time. Wedding Song is a pretty good song, I suppose. But this is one of my least favorite Dylan albums that gets, usually gets positive reviews. So I don't want to dwell on stuff I don't like that much, to be honest. So I will, let's skip ahead. Oh, yes. I did say that there's, in this little period between New Morning and Blood on the Tracks, there's not much going on. But there is, there was Bob Dylan's Greatest Hits 2 that came out in this period, and he recorded 4 songs in 1971 for that. And those 4 songs taken together are almost like a little mini album. Just Greatest Hits Volume 2. Yeah, so you can take those. He did Down in the Flood, You Ain't Going Nowhere, I Shall Be Released, and When I Paint My Masterpiece. They were all recorded in 1971, 3 of them in the same session, and one of them a few months earlier. And you can take those 4 little tracks as almost like a kind of EP that you can listen to. They're on side tracks as well. So yeah, it's not like there was nothing. If you take those 4 tracks, if you take Forever Young, Wedding Song, Knocking on Heaven's Door, you could probably cobble together like a decent album to represent this period for Dylan. And I understand, Dylan has probably more rabid, more loyal fans than any other artist going, really. So there'll be some people listening to this who are like screaming at their screens, because they probably love Planet Waves. But your opinion's as good as mine, I guess. So moving on, then we now approach, and I'll just share the front cover here. I'll just share the front cover of Blood on the Tracks, one of Dylan's true masterpieces. Hopefully you can see that, and I'll read what I wrote 10 years ago. I've been listening to this album a lot this week because I knew I was doing this stream, and it's been a few years since I listened to it. I mean, not to get too personal, but this is a breakup album, and I had a I had a breakup, let's say, so it was difficult for me to listen to this for quite a number of years. I'll put it that way, because it reminded me of a lot of things. So, but anyway, I became reacquainted with it over this past week, and it really is a masterpiece. Blood on the Tracks. I mean, it's in contention for Dylan's best album, I would say. And for those people who are not into Dylan, I think it's a very good starting place. I think you could really get into this album, and then it could unlock, you could either journey backwards to the 60s, or you could journey forwards to Desire and Street Legal from here. But it's a very good place to start. It's also an album that hits you in different ways at different ages, I would say. Yes. So let me just read what I wrote. Dylan kissed and made up with Columbia, promptly left Asylum before coming back at his very best with his first album for Columbia, Coming Back. He had been on a pretty shitty run by his standards since New Morning in 1970. All that was to change with this album, one of his most famous. This is possibly his most accessible and easy to get of his major works. And if you're a true Dylan newbie, not a bad place to start. So there I was 10 years ago saying the same thing. Dylan was going through a separation from his wife, Sarah, when he was writing and recording this album. And though he denies it, it's almost impossible not to think that this fact that he was going through this breakup wasn't forming the inspiration for these songs, which are all about love on the rocks and breakup. We start with one of the most amazing 1-2 punches in music history. Tangled Up in Blue is like an impressionist painting of a relationship. We get all these little snapshots from different moments, and I think it's a true masterpiece. In fact, one of the hold on a second. So sorry, I got a bit of an interruption then. Okay, so I'll just read that sentence again. Tangled Up in Blue is like an impressionist painting of a relationship. We get these little snapshots from different moments, and it's a true masterpiece. And in fact, another movie that I've not been able to, or another thing I've not been able to watch, and in fact I dare not watch it, was a film called The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Now, whatever you make of that movie, I do think that it captured one aspect of what a relationship is, especially a long-term relationship. And that is that you remember these fleeting moments. The way the memory works is closer to this kind of impressionistic painting type form. And, in that film, he goes to this therapy, and the memories are vanishing, and it's kind of, I find it a very moving piece, that. But Tangled Up in Blue has something of that quality as well, that you're glimpsing all of these things. He gives a cool little shout out to Petrarch too. In fact, we talked about that on Unpopular Opinions a couple of days ago, because John D said he thought that might be Dante, but I think he's talking about Petrarch. He says the Italian poet from the 13th century. What does he say? Every one of those words rang true, like they were written. What's the exact lyrics here? Hold on. Tangled Up in Blue lyrics. because some of his best lines ever are on this song. This is easily one of his best songs, I would say, "Tangled Up in Blue." But that bit about the Italian poet, he says, she opened up a book of poems and handed it to me, written by an Italian poet from the 13th century, and every one of them words rang true and glowed like burning coal, pouring off of every page, like it was written in my soul, from me to you. So there we go. But I believe he's talking about Petrarch. Some people have speculated that he's actually talking about Plutarch. So there we go. Simple Twist of Fate takes this same elliptical snapshot approach, and it's the sort of song that you can only really get if you've been in a long-term relationship. I mean, I do believe that this is an album that could only really been written by him at this age. I don't think he could have written Blood on the Tracks when he was a young man. This is the only an album that you could write after having a 10-year plus relationship, I would say. He goes through the gamut of emotions now as he's dealing with the breakup. He's contemplative, he's confused, and he's upset on songs like "You're a Big Girl Now," but he still has a hope that he's going to save things. And then he's ballistic with rage on "Idiot Wind," where he has some really nasty lines like, "You're an idiot, babe. It's a wonder that you still know how to breathe." And again, I don't know how many kind of blazing domestic arguments you've had, but sometimes you say things that are really designed to hurt the other person. And "Idiot Wind," I think, captures Dylan in that sort of mood. According to Dylan himself, all of these songs are not actually about his relationship. I don't believe him, like I said, and I often don't believe artists when they say these sorts of things, but he reckons that all of these songs are about the short stories of Anton Chekhov. And I've just written here, pull the other one, Bob. He wrote, "I couldn't believe after all these years you didn't know me better than that, sweet lady." I mean, yeah, come on. He's talking about Chekhov. He seems to have a history of calling his wife lady in all of these songs. "You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go" is a lighter number, but one that sees him resigned to the fact that he's going to be leaving. He's actually coming to peace with the fact that this is over. And it's also a moment where things are going well, and he wants to hold on to that moment, but he still knows somewhere that she is going to leave. "Meet Me in the Morning" is one of Dylan's cooler 12-bar blues numbers. It's got a killer sign-off. "Look at the sun sinking like a ship. Ain't that just like my heart, babe, when you kiss my lips." I will skip "Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts," as I mostly do when listening. Some people think "Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts" is a really good song. I'm not one of those people, but I realize that's controversial. I've known many kind of Dylanologists, I guess, who rave about that one, but not for me. And now, after this point in the album, the breakup has truly happened. If you track the kind of little story that's running through these songs, if you see her say hello, it's just heartbreaking. And "Shelter from the Storm" is one of Dylan's truly special songs. However, I prefer the acoustic harmonica version that was featured on the Jerry Maguire soundtrack. You'll also find it on the Essential Bob Dylan. I mean, you'd have to check because they keep on changing the order of the Essential Bob Dylan. There's a bootleg series companion piece called "More Blood, More Tracks," which has got every single take. I mean, I think it's several discs long, but it's got every single take of every single song that was done at the sessions. And I think I mentioned this on Unpopular Opinions on Tuesday. The earlier sessions from which that "Shelter from the Storm" take, which is on the Jerry Maguire soundtrack, you know, all of the ones done in those earlier sessions have got this very kind of roomy, warm acoustic sound, whereas the later sessions have this slightly more metallic feel. So yeah, it's quite a journey if you work your way through all of the different takes. I actually very much like the sound of that Shelter from the Storm. However, curiously, I've noticed that on the bootleg series there's a piano in that, whereas in the Jerry Maguire version the piano's not on it. So if the piano's there, it's the wrong version. Although, as far as I can tell, it's the same song. They've just removed the piano in the Jerry Maguire version. It's really the Jerry Maguire version that you need to track down. I wanted to play it for you, but it's not on YouTube, period, which shows you just how censorious his record company are. And then, of course, finally you get the devastating Buckets of Rain, which has got very odd tuning on the guitar. And it's, you'll know what I mean if you listen to that song. And it finds Dylan making one last desperate attempt to make things better. Knockout masterpiece of an album on which he is able to channel raw emotion into art. Everything here is at once poetic, but also somehow real and adult. This is, I think, a kind of mature period Dylan piece. He's truly at the, at his peak as a writer here. And if you are going through what he is, it's also an album that can surely make you cry. So there we go. As you can probably tell, I have oddly personal relationship with Blood on the Tracks. So next, the next album to get onto before moving on to Desire is the Basement Tapes, which was released in 1975, although it was actually recorded back in 1967. Dylan's second official album, upon re-signing for Columbia, was actually recorded in 1967, in between the motorcycle accident and the recording of John Wesley Harding. It's just a bunch of rough cuts with members of the band, first at Dylan's house near Woodstock, then in the basement at the famous Big Pink. At these sessions, they recorded a lot of material, lots and lots and lots of it, a mixture of covers and new songs written by Dylan. Then, in 1975, Columbia put together a compilation of 24 of these recordings and released them as the Basement Tapes. Now, among the beardy Dylanologists and folk nerds and so on, there is some controversy over this release, the original Basement Tapes release. For a start, there is less than a quarter of what was recorded on the official release. Second, there are 8 band-only songs that don't feature Dylan. And to make matters worse, there is evidence that these 8 songs were not recorded at those sessions. So among certain of the music nerds, they don't like the inauthenticity, I guess, of those 8 band-only songs that were included. To make matters worse still, there is evidence that the 8 songs included by the band were actually doctored to sound more basementy than they actually were, which is very naughty. If you want the real deal, the best complete collection I've come across, you can get the bootleg called A Tree with Roots. Just don't let Columbia's psycho legal team catch you. So A Tree with Roots was basically everything. Now, since I've written that, Dylan's record label have finally released all of the Basement Tapes in sorry, I'm still sharing my screen here. I should hold on. Basement Tapes. I'll just get the cover up. Hold on. There you go. Hopefully you can see that. That's the front cover of the Basement Tapes. All of these kind of freaks and weirdos and stuff with Dylan there. Yeah, so I believe one of the bootleg series, maybe volume 11, I think, bootleg series volume 11, is essentially what the old Tree with Roots bootleg was. They've just released it officially now. Okay. Um, but I'm not here to tell you all of that. Allowing for all of the mythos and the shenanigans around this album, the question you want to know is the Basement Tapes any good? The first thing to note is that it is utterly unique in the Dylan canon. There is a truly ramshackle quality to everything on the Basement Tapes. Dylan sings in this half-baked, almost drunk-sounding voice, and behind him there's an organ, a tambourine, a guitar or two, and just a general feeling that they're having a knees up. Now lyrically, Dylan seems to be evoking Depression-era America, talking about a bottle of bread and sweet bourbon daddies who ain't got a dime, and this is the kind of world of the Basement Tapes. And there's a real rogues gallery of strange people to meet, from Mrs. Henry to Tiny Montgomery. There's also this absurd sense of the utterly mundane running through everything. Clothesline Saga is literally a song about having a chat while putting out the washing. At one point, his neighbor blows his nose. If there are hidden meanings to these songs, the seemingly random $1 Million Bash, I've never been aware of what they are. During Lo and Behold, he buys a girl a herd of moose, Apple Suckling Tree, and Ye Heavy, and a bottle of bread, are similarly playful and silly. And all of that stuff is great and fun. However, there are some serious songs too in the collection. Tears of Rage has some strong echoes of King Lear as a daughter betrays her father. Too Much of Nothing seems to be facing the void, or as Dylan puts it, the waters of oblivion. Crash on the Levee, Down in the Flood is a reworking of an old standard about the Mississippi floods of the 1920s, but given a distinctively Old Testament feel here that makes it sound like God is flooding the whole world all over again. And finally, there's This Wheel's on Fire, which has this foreboding, ominous, and even threatening feel. Some have postulated that it's the wheel of his motorbike, but I like to imagine it's something more classical. Yet another allusion to King Lear, of course, and coincidentally, it is the name of G. Wilson Knight's classic work of Shakespeare criticism, The Wheel of Fire. So what about these 8 tracks by the band then? Well, if you ask me, they're a bit annoying. Robbie Robertson has a high and whiny voice, but for me, they don't do enough to disrupt the flow to stop this from getting the highest rating. It is essential and unique Dylan, and the bootlegs are always there for the purists. So there we go. If I'm racing here, it's because there's a lot to get in. Okay, we've gone half an hour so far, and we've reached Desire, so we're actually on pretty good pace. Okay, so let's get on now to Desire. Desire by Dylan. Desire. Okay, so I don't know why it does that, but there you go. So, all right, I'll read you what I said, and then I'm actually going to play. I'm going to play. I haven't found a very good version of this. It used to be on YouTube from the official Dylan channel, but they've taken it down for some reason. But I have found this rather this one with kind of inconsistent sound, but it's probably good enough to play on a stream, but you can track it down in your own time in a second. Okay. Shortly after releasing Blood on the Tracks, Dylan went on a mad and wild tour called the Rolling Thunder Revue, where he performed with a whole ragtag of different performers. There's a fantastic video of him doing Isis from this tour that captures the spirit of it pretty well, and I'm going to play that video in a second for reasons that I'm about to tell you. It's easy to see how this tour inspired the sound and the feel of Desire. I should also mention that the poet Jacques Levy has writing credits on most of the lyrics here. First, though, let's get Hurricane out of the way. It's his first overtly political song since the mid-60s and famously concerns the incarceration of the boxer Rubin Carter. The first 50 times you listen to it, you'll love it, I'm sure. I tend to feel these days that it's a little crude by Dylan's standards. Isis, on the other hand, is a majestic, swashbuckling, and completely awesome song that I never tire of. The version on the album is great. It's got this kind of, you can imagine this guy riding through, some Arizona setting, or in fact, because he mentions the pyramids and so on, he's almost like a Tintin adventure during the song. The version of the album is great and is actually enhanced by looking at the photo on the front cover. And I imagining him riding around, digging up tombs, looking for treasure. Now, thematically, if you think about Desire as a follow-up to Blood on the Tracks, and again, I can speak, from experience of this. After you have a big breakup like that and a divorce and so on, you kind of go a little bit wild for a while. I certainly did. And I think you can see Dylan doing, like, losing himself in his work, kind of unraveling a bit, but, he's doing it in the way that only he can. And very much I understand Desire in that sort of context, especially these days. Although Isis and the pyramids suggest Egypt, I prefer to imagine Arizona or New Mexico. I really, if I picture where he is in Desire, I imagine he's in New Mexico, around that kind of area. I've actually traveled to those regions when I did Route 66, and there's something amazing that happens when you're doing Route 66, because the landscape, the stark changes in the US landscape, it really is quite incredible. You go from the kind of green rolling, like literally white picket fences of Illinois, and then once you reach Louisiana, everything's a bit rougher and a bit readier. They've still got white picket fences, but they're just not painted, but by the time you get to Texas and you move on to New Mexico and Arizona, it's arid, and it's almost like you're in you can see those dry mountains in the background and old kind of burial tombs of various Native American tribes and so on. And sometimes you don't see a car for hours. You're driving for hours and you don't see anybody else on the road, dead straight. And anyway, I imagine that's the sort of place he is in on Desire. There are a number of fast versions of Isis from the Rolling Thunder tour that you should seek out, but my personal favorite one appears on Biograph, and you'll know it when you find it because it's from Montreal. I think it's from the Montreal Forum, 1975, is the absolute best version of Isis you'll find. And you'll know it when you find it because he says, this is a song about marriage. It's called Isis. It's for Leonard if he's still here. And he's talking about Leonard Cohen, of course, who's in Montreal because he's in Canada. Just awesomeness. Now, let me play a little bit of that version of Isis if I can find it, because you'll see what I mean about the difference in where Dylan was in his life and how he was as a performer here compared to what he was like in on an album like Blood on the Track. So beware, the sound goes up and down here, but it's the best version I could find. Okay, so let's have a little watch of Isis from Montreal Forum 1975.
We said, oh, that need for the pole in the north. I gave him my naked, and he gave me his word. I said, what we got? We say we be back by the fourth. I said, that's the best news that I've ever heard. I was thinking about chocolates. I was thinking about gold. Thinking about diamonds. Say the word. It's a devilish cold. I was thinking about ISIS. I said, but I was so reckless. Just told me on Monday. We could meet up again. Things will be different the next time we win. I just be her friend. I still can't remember all the best things she said. I'm not trying to find if I bury it, it'll make me cry. But I knew what he had on his mind. When the wind was high, when the snow was on the ridges, the chops in the night, and the chops in the dawn. When he died, I was hoping that it wasn't contagious. But I had to get out.
Okay, we'll leave it there, but I think you can see that this kind of captures the slightly mad spirit of the Rolling Thunder review, and again, very bad sound quality on YouTube for some reason. But I've got it on a DVD somewhere. I remember it was included as a bonus disc. I can't remember which. Was it a special version of Desire which had a bonus disc on it? I can't remember, but or maybe it was the bootleg series of the Rolling Thunder review. But yeah, if you can find that performance, in DVD quality, then or Blu-ray or whatever, that would be better, obviously, than that version I just played there. So yeah, for me, that's the best version of ISIS, and I think it kind of captures, the spirit, I guess, of this album. There's a distinctly world-traveling feel on Desire, not just in the subject matter, but in the sound, most explicitly on Mozambique, Romance in Durango, and Black Diamond Bay. Aside from those tracks, One More Cup of Coffee is a great song about a girl who was an outlaw or a drifter who was about to head to the ominous valley below. Incidentally, One More Cup of Coffee is one of the very few songs where I would consider a cover version to be possibly better than Dylan's. This will be incredibly controversial, but I reckon the White Stripes may steal that. I think the White Stripes version of One More Cup of Coffee is possibly better than Dylan's. It is all very vividly, so the whole feel of it is very vividly kind of outdoorsy. You can picture the plains and the prairies and the mountains and the starry skies. Oh Sister is a strange love song, but it's a good one. Joey is one of the worst songs that Dylan ever wrote, if you ask me. I really hate Joey for some reason. Sarah is one of his most personal and direct love songs, and he's asking her to stay with him. He admits that Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands was about her too. And just like that, long personal closer. I'm not the biggest fan of Sarah. I've never been a massive fan of Dylan's 16-minute album closers. In fact, I prefer his longer tracks on later albums than these ones. It's all possibly a bit too earnest for my tastes. That's why I wrote 10 years ago. Desire often gets given 5 stars, but honestly, it's possibly my least favorite of his major albums. I don't like the idea of Bob going traveling and finding himself and coming back with a bunch of wooden beads around his wrist. And at times, this is the aural equivalent of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a brilliant album, but it's not quite there for me. So that was a bit of Gen X Daria from me 10 years ago there. I've possibly softened my stance on that since then, because I'm not sure if Bob was traveling and finding himself in that way. This is not like kind of the Beatles go to Bangladesh sort of stuff. So yeah. Okay, so that's my take on Desire. Like marching ahead, let's waste no time. We could possibly get to Street Legal now. Closing out Dylan's 70s trilogy, there's a real change of pace. Street Legal adds gospel style backing singers. Get used to those because they're going to stick around for a while. And a saxophone to the mix. Plus, you get all this cool tarot card imagery everywhere, all over the album. Street Legal is actually a kind of favorite of mine because it sounds unlike any record he's ever made. It's kind of hot and steamy, but it's also claustrophobic, sometimes a little too humid and dark. And his voice seems a bit different too. Sometimes music comes to represent moments in your own life. And I first got Street Legal when I was in my first undergraduate year of university, and I was going through some relationship troubles. And this album almost always takes me back to those days. And you probably have albums like that too, that instantly take you back to a moment in your life. And I think Dylan, more than any other artist, he's like a companion, but different albums come to the fore, in different moments. And I'll talk more about that when I get to Infidels, which I have completely turned on. My view on Infidels has completely changed in the 10 years since I wrote this guide, simply because I probably wasn't ready for Infidels back then, but I am now. But anyway, Street Legal really takes me back to that first undergraduate year, where I was kind of, we took the unusual step. We kind of went to school together, and then we went to the same university together as well. Anybody who's done that will know that that's a very difficult transition to make. But almost a constant companion to all of that was Street Legal. The theme, I listened to it constantly. If I wasn't listening to the Smiths, I was listening to Street Legal during that year. The theme of Street Legal is undoubtedly change. Changing of the guards seems to signal a change of women. So a change from Sarah to whoever he is talking about for most of this album, but also a change of direction in his faith system, in his beliefs. Seemingly a change of direction towards God, or a religious or a spiritual rebirth. New Pony continues the theme and has some really kind of nasty imagery and raunchy lyrics by Bob standards. He says, "Well, I got a new pony. She knows how to foxtrot, lope, and pace. She got great big hind legs, long black shaggy hair above her face." Apparently he'd started a relationship with one of his backing singers. I think she was like a black girl who I think maybe had some kids with her as well. Somebody would have to remind me now, but I've always imagined that New Pony is about her, and in fact that the girl on this album is someone who he's having there's an undercurrent of sex on Street Legal, but it's kind of like a very different type of relationship from the one that he had with Sarah, who he split up from at this point. And I've just written back here, there is no doubt in my mind that Bob is hitting rebound action here. So there we go. The critic Michael Gray, whose book Song and Dance Man is really worth getting if you're into Dylan, is a massive fan of the song No Time to Think, with its odd waltzing rhythm and crazy rhyme scheme. I've never been that high on it myself, but I think Michael Gray makes a pretty good case for No Time to Think as a classic in that book. Baby Stop Crying is a great single. Weirdly, I had Baby Stop Crying on a vinyl. My uncle spent a certain period DJing, and he gave me all these kind of old singles that he had, and Baby Stop Crying was one of them. So there we go. Is Your Love in Vain has some great, feminists would say they're misogynistic, but to me Is Your Love in Vain is like, I'm a man, damn it. I'm a man, why are you going to respect this? And I especially like these few lines because I relate to them. He says, "Are you so fast that you cannot see that I must have solitude? When I am in the darkness, why do you intrude? Do you know my world? Do you know my kind? Or must I explain?" You know, when I'm playing video games at 2 a.m., don't interrupt me, you know, or when I'm getting on with my man stuff and staring into the fire, don't come into that space, basically. And there's a lot of that. I mean, I would say the gender politics of Street League are incredibly traditional in many ways. So, and I've written here 10 years ago, we all need our time to stare into the fire, right, boys? And it was like I was saying on Unpopular Opinions, how I don't believe in therapy. I think it's a feminine way of dealing with things. The masculine way of dealing with things is exactly as Dylan wrote it there. True love tends to forget. Has a kick-ass refrain. I would, you know, in fact, I love the way he sings it. He says, "I was lying down in the reeds without any oxygen. I saw you in the wilderness among the men." You know, and again, the way he sings that, the passion and the energy there, he's obviously rejuvenated on Street Legal. People tend to point to Slow Train Coming as this kind of big transition, but it's massively signaled and telegraphed by Street Legal, if you ask me. There's not much not to like here. I mean, I think Street Legal is a great album. And I really like the closer with its, so Where Are You Tonight, Journey Through Dark Heat. Dare I try to play this? Shall I? Where Are You? Because I think it really does capture something. It's not even on. Is it on? Well, they've only got Changing of the Guard. You see that? Why isn't Where Are You Tonight on? Where Are You Tonight's not even on YouTube. That's how bad they are. They just take it down, which is mental, if you ask me. So I'll have to, you know, it obviously means I can't play it. So I've just written, Where Are You Tonight, Journey Through Dark Heat is just a tour de force of a track. It has a magnificent, audacious rhyme scheme. So there's a long distance train rolling through the rain. That's AA. Tears on the letter I write. B. There's a woman I long to touch, and I'm missing her so much. CC. But she's drifting like a satellite. B. There's a neon light ablaze in this green smoky haze. DD. Laughter down on Elizabeth Street. E. There's a lonesome bell tone in that valley of stone. FF. Where she bathed in a stream of pure heat. E. Her father would like to emphasize you got to be more than streetwise. GG. But he practiced what he preached from the heart. H. A full-blooded Cherokee. He predicted it to me. II. The time and the place that the trouble would start. There's a babe in the arms of a woman in a rage. J. And a long-time golden-haired stripper on stage. J. And she winds back the clock and she turns back the page. J. Of a book that no one can write. B. All the way back to B. Oh, Where Are You Tonight? I mean, that is, I mean, for a rock song, to have a rhyme scheme like that is just, you know, there's a reason that he won a Nobel Prize, let's put it that way. Those internal rhymes give everything a great sense of urgency. I mean, I was just reading those lines, and you could see that the internal rhythm and the meter of the line was pushing you forward with a tremendous momentum. And I think Where Are You Tonight is one of Dylan's greatest vocal performances on record, period. It's a sort of greatest hits, this album, of all of Dylan's songwriting techniques. It's a sort of greatest hits of all of Dylan's songwriting techniques to date, all in one song. You've got the directness and the subject matter, which owe something to Blood on the Tracks. You've got the sprawling locations and the Cherokee right out of Desire. You've got the piling up of increasingly complex images that wouldn't be Out of Place on Bringing It All Back Home. And then this line, I left town at dawn with Marcel and St. John, strong men belittled by doubt, could easily be on John Wesley Harding. I mean, that's like you're transported back to the world of John Wesley Harding when you hear a line like that. Such a good song. And taken with all of the other great tracks here, in my view, Street Legal is probably Bob's most underrated album. Critics are often down on it for all the wrong reasons, most often decrying the slick production and the backing singers as evidence that Dylan was lost for direction, or else saying that Dylan needs to stop talking about his divorce now. I mean, if you ask me, he has. Robert Christgau's review, for example, is hopelessly off the mark. So this is one of Dylan's best albums, and I wouldn't skip it under any circumstances. So that's I'm pretty high on Street Legal. So moving on with swiftness, because we were an hour in and we're getting to the end of the 70s. Could I even make it all the way to 2020? X to doubt. Slow Train Coming. Okay, so let's get this one up. So Slow Train Coming. Can't believe Irish Unite's not on YouTube. It's insane. What they should do is like the Beatles have got all those videos they've made of the Beatles, and Dylan should have somebody do that for all of his songs. Instead of just wrenching them off YouTube. Get with the program, Columbia. Anyway, Slow Train Coming. This is where Dylan officially, quote unquote, went Christian. And if the production on Street Legal was slick, here it is positively sleek. Not least because Dire Straits were on hand to provide backing. You'll hear Mark Knopfler's guitar everywhere. It's all over the album. There's an obvious step up in production sheen, I would say, on Slow Train Coming. And it's also great. Bob is obviously refreshed here. He sings with real conviction. Gotta Serve Somebody, quite funky, but also quite harsh, fire and brimstone, Old Testament tone that marks Dylan's Christian period. This is me 10 years ago. I wrote, I am not a Christian, nor am I religious in any way, but to my mind, the cool stuff in the Bible is all the violent imagery. Dylan's God doesn't seem to be turning any cheeks. He's that vengeful one causing the floods and whatnot. Precious Angel, I Believe in You, and Gonna Change My Way of Thinking are all straight up declarations of faith that find their power in their impassioned earnestness. It's also impossible to imagine the snarling hipster 1966 Dylan writing or singing about this stuff. But in a way, that is what makes it great, because he's a different man. He's a different man at this point, as everybody is a different person through the different moments of their life. Here, he needed to find God. Slow Train gets a bit jingoistic, but I don't really care about that. When You're Gonna Wake Up has some of that evangelical fire and brimstone stuff that I was talking about. When He Returns is an elegy to God that you could file alongside those by John Donne or Gerard Manley Hopkins. There is no need to mark this down simply because it's about religious conversion. And in fairness, most critics these days don't. Yeah, one of the stupidest takes that I'd come across in the 90s was Dylan was great up until he turned Christian. And then, and then lame, cringe. No, he's amazing. He's so re-energized in this period that to write this off just because it's Christian is just, talk about boomer truth regime. So, yeah, I really think Slow Train Coming is a great album, and this is a great streak. This streak from Blood on the Tracks to Slow Train Coming. Like I said, his first 10 albums is an amazing hot streak. Then he kind of goes. Then arguably you say, well, in the early 70s, there's some mess stuff there. But then, like from Blood on the Tracks to here, that's what 4 or 5 album run. Every single one good, interesting, and different. I mean, we covered those 4 albums: Blood on the Tracks, Desire, Street Legal, and Slow Train Coming. Who has ever released four such different albums in a row, with all of them being good and interesting and unique in their own way? I mean, again, we can talk about 4 album runs, but I would hold that one up against anyone as well, just for the sheer variety of it. Anyway, let's carry on, because now we are going to go to Saved, and unfortunately, this is where the inspiration that makes Slow Train Coming so good starts to kind of peter a little bit. The shame of this album, the shame of Saved, is that it's nowhere near as awesome as the hair-raising gospel tour that Bob went on around this time. I have lots of recordings from various shows around this time, and they all just smoke what he does here. There is a hint of that passion and energy on the album, not least on the upbeat title track. Solid Rock is pretty great, but a lot of it is just killed, in my view, by expensive sounding and extremely clean production. There's also a lot of middling stuff here as well. Oh, and no matter which version of the album you get, the front cover is also horrible. I've got the one with the awful original, but check out the equally bad re-release version as well. If I was you, I would try to find his stuff from the 1981 tour, and if you can't find anything, just listen to the 2 tracks I've highlighted and skip this one until you're deep into Dylan. That's what I said 10 years ago. And lucky for you that since then, the Bootleg series has made a lot of those 1981 recordings available. I'm just trying to remember which volume it is now. Yes, Bootleg series, volume 13, Trouble No More, 1979 to 1981. Now, Trouble No More has a lot of live performances, and you'll see exactly what I mean. The energy and the passion in those live performances through that whole period are better than anything on Saved, really. Slow Train Coming is a great album. Saved, unfortunately, it feels like the studio process took a lot of that energy out of the songs. Go and listen to something like Groom Still Waiting for the Altar. Groom Still Waiting at the Altar from like May 1981, live version from California, for example, or I'm just saying that the live tour is much better than what was committed to vinyl, I guess. And much the same of that, I would say, is true of Shot of Love, which follows it in 1981. I'll just read what I've written here. The trend of Dylan using guest stars on his Christian stuff continues here, as both Ringo Starr and Ronnie Wood turn up for some hot gospel action. The final part of the Christian trilogy is a good bit better than Saved, because there are fewer slow songs dragging things down, and that gives proceedings a genuine sense of excitement. I'd almost call this a jaunty record. There's more honky-tonk piano and a sort of Caribbean jangliness than on the other Christian albums. The Groom Still Waiting at the Altar is a great rocker, mixing this urgent, up-tempo, piano-led, gospelly sound with Dylan's cool Old Testament imagery. Finally, Every Grain of Sand is easily his best Christian song, which can also double as a sequel to Chimes of Freedom. It doesn't sound anything else. It doesn't sound like anything else on the rocked up, excitable album that precedes it. and it's up there with Dylan's very best song. So yeah, controversially, I would say that Shot of Love is significantly better than Saved. So I would probably stand by that. I should mention, I didn't seem to do it in my write-up, but Joker Man from Slow Train Coming is seen as a very major Dylan song. I had like PhD theses written on Joker Man. You'll see like incredibly detailed breakdowns of what's happening in Joker Man, and it's often said that it's one of Dylan's most important songs, and it would be remiss of me not to tell you that if you're a newbie. All right, so let's move on now to Infidels. Let me just have a look. Get the cover up. Infidels. And I would say, as I alluded to, this is probably the biggest gap between me now and me 10 years ago in terms of what I think of an album. The greatest divergence and changes come over Infidels. So here's what I said 10 years ago. It was released in 1983. At the time, Infidels was hailed as a return to form for Dylan, as fans and critics everywhere rejoiced that he was no longer doing all this Christian stuff and returning to more secular and political material. Witness, for example, Stephen Thomas Erlewine on allmusic.com talk about how its writing is closer to Dylan's peak of the mid-70s, and Infidels is a triumph, finding Dylan coming tantalizingly close to regaining all his powers. The truth is that, first, it's not obvious that Bob is in any way turning his back on Christianity here. Second, the political songs are truly rubbish. And third, this is probably his worst album since Planet Waves. Or, if you like that, Dylan. There are some saving grace. Oh yeah, sorry, Joker Man is on Infidels. Sorry, not Slow Train Coming. Joker Man's here. Yeah, there are some saving graces. Joker Man is a major song. Lots of essays written on it, as I just mentioned. But honestly, pretty much everything else here is shit, and some of it embarrassingly so. I won't get into the politics of Neighborhood Bully, but it's about Israel. License to Kill features this stunning couplet: "Oh, man has invented his doom. First step was touching the moon." I'll come back to that in a second because, like I said, this is me 10 years ago, and I profoundly disagree with all of these takes now. Maybe I just have a massive blind spot when it comes to this album, but it's just utterly shite. Union Sundown finds Bob complaining about how all his stuff is made in foreign countries rather than in the good old USA. I don't like Bob Dylan, the right-wing tabloid columnist, and it's not because I care at all about the politics. It's because he writes appalling, trite songs that make me cringe. Crap. The biggest crime of Infidels, however, is in what he left off it. One of his all-time best songs, Blind Willie McTell, which you'll find on the Bootleg Series Volume 3. In fact, that single disc is probably better than Dylan's entire officially released 80s output. So I actually disagree with me from 10 years ago quite profoundly now. And as I was saying, maybe as a man in my late 20s, right, I was not able to appreciate what Infidels was doing, as opposed to now, a man in my late 30s who runs significant reactionary right-wing YouTube channel. Maybe my sensibilities have changed sufficiently, or maybe I've just become that much older that I understand what's happening on Infidels that much more. And in fact, I think License to Kill is a great song. And I actually looked into that line, man has invented his doom, first step was touching the moon. And apparently that was a big idea in the evangelical scene of the 70s, that it was that there was a kind of conspiracy theory about what was happening, like why was NASA wasting all this money going to the moon. But obviously he's talking about the Faustian man, the unconstrained vision, unbridled technology, and I think there are significant reactionary and even populist themes all over Infidels that make a lot more sense now in 2021, not just where I am in my life, but where we are politically. I think Dylan was a lot more on the money on Infidels than than may have appeared. I mean, Union Sundown could almost be a Donald Trump speech in a way. I mean, I'll just read some of these lyrics. This is License to Kill. Man thinks because he rules the earth, he can do with it as he please. And if things don't change soon, he will. Oh, man has invented his doom. First step was touching the moon. And then he goes, then there's the chorus. There's a woman on my block. She just sit there as the night grows still. She say, who gonna take away his license to kill? And then later, now he's hell bent for destruction. He's afraid and confused, and his brain has been mismanaged with great skill. All he believes are his eyes, and his eyes, they just tell him lies. I really do think that there's more to these political songs than I was really giving them credit for back in the day. Okay, so yeah, shall I read a bit of Union Sundown as well? Now, there's a lot more to say about the songs that were left off Infidels, and I may even see if I can play a couple, risking the ire of the record label. Let's have a look and see if it's what's included. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I mean the outtakes from Infidels are as good, if not better, than the actual album. He was on fire in 1983, clearly. Let me just read the lyrics from Union Sundown. Okay. I wonder if Union Sundown's actually on. No. No, it's not. It's just, yet again, it's not on. Just don't understand why none of his songs are on YouTube. It's just they have to sort that out. Get with the 21st century. So I'll just read the lyrics, okay, of Union Sundown. Well, my shoes, they come from Singapore. My flashlights from Taiwan. My tablecloths from Malaysia. My belt buckles from the Amazon. You know, the shirt I wear comes from the Philippines, and the car I drive is a Chevrolet. But it was put together down in Argentina by a guy making 30 cents a day. Well, it's sundown on the Union, and what's made in the USA. Sure was a good idea till greed got in the way. Well, this silk dress is from Hong Kong, and the pearls are from Japan, while the dog collars from India, and the flower pots from Pakistan. All the furniture, it says, made in Brazil, where a woman, she slaved for sure, bringing home 30 cents a day to a family of 12. You know, that's a lot of money to her. Well, it's sundown on the Union, and what's made in the USA sure was a good idea till greed got in the way. Well, you know, lots of people complaining that there is no work. I say, why you say that for, when nothing you got is US made? They don't make nothing here no more. You know, capitalism is above the law. It don't count less it sells. When it costs too much to build it at home, you just build it cheaper someplace else. Well, it's sundown on the Union, etc. Well, the job that you used to have, they gave it to somebody down in El Salvador. The unions are big business, friend. They're going out like a dinosaur. They used to grow food in Kansas. Now they want to grow it on the moon and eat it raw. I can see the day coming when even your home garden is going to be against the law. Democracy don't rule the world. You'd better get that in your head. This world is ruled by violence, but I guess that's better left unsaid. From Broadway to the Milky Way, there's a loss of territory indeed, and a man's going to do what he has to do when he's got a hungry mouth to feed. I mean, I hesitate to say that it's based, but certainly he's anticipating talking points that have since become that could almost be like a video made by some of the populist right wingers on YouTube. All right, let me see if I can find any of the infidels outtakes on YouTube, and we'll okay, hold on. Give me a second here, folks. I don't understand why Dylan's yeah, I mean, there was a huge amount of material cut from it. I mean, loads of it doesn't even make it onto bootleg stuff. I mean, he recorded a version of 16 Tons by Merle Travis, for example, which I'd love to hear. But yeah, I've been listening to some of the Infidels outtakes as well. And again, there are certain songs that only hit you later. So obviously, Blind Willie McTell is the don't think this is on there either. So let's have a look. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. No, that's not on there either. There's a song called Lord Protect My Child, which is a lovely, really nice prayer, really, to protect his child. And again, that's one of those things that I only really understood after becoming a father. So, like I keep on saying, that where you are personally in your own life also affects how you understand things. And it seems like a lot of the material from Infidels is stuff I just didn't get 10 years ago that I do get now. But yeah, if you can track down Bootleg Series Volume 3, that suite of songs from the Infidels outtakes, Blind Willie McTell, Foot of Pride, Lord Protect My Child are phenomenal. In fact, probably better than anything on the album. So yes, let's just make sure people are still with me. Who's with me? Yes. Okay. So let me carry on. Now, the next album, unfortunately, is not one that I've had any kind of epiphany on like I have with Infidels. I didn't like it back then. I don't like it now. And you have to see the front cover because it really says everything. Look at the state of Bob Dylan in 1985. Look at that jacket he's wearing. Look at the horrible 80s colors. Does that look like a man who was comfortable with what was happening in 1985 to you? So let me just read what I wrote back in 1985. For reasons I've never been able to discern, this album frequently gets rewarded 5 stars. The backing singers are back, and so is Bob writing and singing love songs, purportedly to Elizabeth Taylor this time. Can you imagine Elizabeth Taylor was romantically involved with both Richard Burton and Bob Dylan? But anyway, yeah. So apparently a lot of the songs here were written to Elizabeth Taylor, and I don't know if they actually had a affair or relationship or anything. But anyway, many critics bust out the best since Blood on the Tracks line for this, but I really don't get the love at all. The production is extremely 80s, which is not a bad thing by itself, because I kind of love that sleek 80s sound, from a different part of my brain. I love the 80s, as everybody knows. But really, Dylan sings in his worst ever voice here on this album. I don't think Dylan ever sounds worse than he does on Empire Burlesque, often sounding somewhat like a stuffed pig. There are some flashes of lyrical greatness. I mean, it is Dylan after all. But in my view, this album is basically rubbish. since there are those out there who give it the highest rating or just below, you'll have to make up your own mind. But for me, this is Dylan's Nadia, and the front cover says everything. I mean, he was just, I don't know what happened between the Christian period and Infidels and the mid 80s, because it seems like he really falls off the wagon in a big way in the mid 80s. Like, there's a few interviews from around this period where he seemed like he's coked out of his mind. There's the famous footage of Dylan at the at Live Aid, where he's just like, there's all these stars from all around the world, and Dylan is just like lost. Like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, he just doesn't, he really seemed like a man adrift in the mid 80s to me. It's just not I guess it's the 80s were like increasingly materialistic, I guess, and fashions were, don't know, it was just in a place where it wasn't easy for Bob Dylan to find a niche for himself in 1985. But I also think that he may have been in some sort of spiritual crisis himself, because it seems like he kind of stops talking about the God stuff as well during this period as well, too. So anyway, next album is from 1987, and it's Knocked Out Loaded. Knocked Out Loaded by Bob Dylan. I won't you can see the album front cover there. And I've just written, those backing singers are still around, but rather than the gospel of the Christian albums or the disco-y stylings of the last two albums, this one has a grittier and heavier guitar sound, a guitar-driven sound. The production is a little more muddied up than it has been at any time since Street Legal. He collaborates with the playwright Sam Shepard on the very long song Brownsville Girl, which is usually talked up as a lost classic. I find personally that it actually breaks the momentum of a fairly enjoyable rocky album. This is a bit like a late 80s version of Self-Portrait, in that it's a pick and mix of covers and random songs written by various people. Tom Petty drops in as another collaborator, and in fact it's around this time that the Traveling Wilburys get together. I'm not going to be covering the Traveling Wilburys. That's Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, George Harrison, Roy Orbison. Is anyone else in that group? I want to say that was it. It was like they were like a kind of super group. I feel like I'm missing someone. Did one of Cosby, Stills, Nash and Young join that group? Somebody will tell me in the. Jeff Lynne, that was it. Jeff Lynne, yeah. Jeff Lynne was the other member. I mean, the Traveling Wilburys is fun. I mean, it's a bit ramshackle, but it's a good kind of diversion, I guess. If you want a bit of fun, and it's probably the biggest star power in any group of all time, right? It genuinely was like a super duper group. All of them in various ways at like a low ebb in their life or whatever, but for that reason, it's fun. Kind of like midlife crisis 60s rockers, I guess. Anyway, back to Knocked Out Loaded. I think it's an improvement on Empire Burlesque. Note, this is a very controversial opinion. So typically most people give, I say most people, it's not rare to see Empire Burlesque given 5 stars. It's something I don't understand. And it's not unusual to see Knocked Out Loaded given like 1 or 2 stars. I wouldn't reverse that, but I would say that Knocked Out Loaded is better than Empire Burlesque. It's just got better stuff on it. So yeah, but that's just my view, as with all of these things. Next album is Down in the Groove. Down in the Groove. Down in the Groove. This is like real Shitsville Dylan here. So of all of Dylan's albums, Dylan aside, Down in the Groove is usually picked out as his very worst, and in my view a little unfairly. I mean, it's more or less Knocked Out Loaded Part 2 with a similar sound and a similar approach of covers and collaboration. I mean, okay, his version of Let's Stick Together is totally crap. But there is also some good stuff here. Ugliest Girl in the World is a fun little rocker. I quite like Silvio. Silvio, Silver and Gold by Becker. You know, it's good. So it's a good rocker. Quite catchy. One of his more underrated singles. Wonder if Silvio is on YouTube. Let's have a look. Bob Dylan. I bet you Silvio is even Silvio is not going to be on YouTube. What is it with Dylan not being on YouTube? A real problem. All right, okay. Silvio is on right there. Let's hear a bit of Silvio. Hear me out here, okay? Silvio's not bad. Okay, I'll play a bit of Silvio. Here we go. Stream gets taken down for playing bloody Silvio. Right, ready for this?
Stake my future on a hell of a path. Looks like tomorrow is a
Coming on fast. Yeah.
Ain't complaining about what I got. Seen better times, but
Who has not?
Silvio.
I like saying that line, by the way. I've seen better times, but who has not? It's a great line. You know, anyway, let's carry on.
Silver and gold won't buy back the beat of a hot roll cold. Silvio, I gotta go. Find out something only dead men know.
Okay, anyway, there's a bit of Silvio. I won't dice with death too much longer. Okay. So now we get to a real return to form. The thing is with 80s Dylan, right? If you consider that the Christian period isn't that bad, the Infidels actually is a very good album. All we're really talking about is a run of 3 dodgy albums. You know, Empire Burlesque, Knocked Out Loaded, and Down in the Groove. And then he's back with No Mercy. So it's only like 3 albums off. It's not that bad. And so, yeah, I'll just get up the front cover of Oh Mercy. And this really is a great Dylan album, in my view. There it is, Oh Mercy. And I'll just read what I wrote 10 years ago. So let's have a look. I mean, that song, Silvio, that I just played is from Dylan's typically considered worst album. So, you know. Anyway, so here's Oh Mercy. And just when it looked like Dylan was down and out, he came roaring back with this minor classic, produced by Daniel Lanois. This is a real gem of an album, and one of his most radio friendly and accessible. It wouldn't be a bad one to start with, in all honesty. Yeah, I mean, Oh Mercy is not a bad... If you're someone who's like written off Dylan, try something like Oh Mercy, which is just a bit off the beaten track and full of songs that are really interesting and profound, and probably you're not going to hear on the radio, right? Dylan has a new mode of writing here that I can only describe as list-based. Thinking about it, I guess it is the mode of hard rain. So there's a lot of like repetition of various refrains, but then he changes up the line each time. Here are 10 songs that mostly riff on a central idea that is repeated again and again during the album. But it's effective, and it gives Dylan great scope to show off his range of imagery, which has always been one of his strengths. He's always been good at clinching one-liner that completes a rhyming couplet. He's very good at that, you know, sly second line that closes out the couplet. Incidentally, Shakespeare is also very good at that. It was his signature. If you ever read Shakespeare's sonnets, his clinching final couplet was his signature. It's what made him different from a lot of other sonneteers. Anyway, and this format, this kind of list-based songwriting mode of Oh Mercy, is almost custom-made to deliver all of those great one-liners that Dylan's so good at. And we get absolutely tons of them all over the shop. Political World and Everything is Broken, these are the sorts of political songs that Dylan would have been... these are the sorts of political songs that Dylan should have been writing in the 1980s. If you ever read what's that book? The Fourth Turning. They talk about the 1980s as the start of the unraveling. You know, we're living through the unraveling, and Oh Mercy is an album about a world that is falling apart, a world that is a world in which traditional values are being trampled on by materialism. You know, and I think again that people misunderstand where Dylan's coming from. A lot of these things, it's coming from a quite traditional and even reactionary place a lot of the time. It's not coming from some kind of left-wing utopian vision of the world. You know, it's coming from a vision of the world that says, at root, violence is the thing that makes things tick, as he mentioned on Infidels, and what he's really lamenting is the loss of those traditional values, those traditional Christian virtues that you know, people still talk about now. So he's lamenting, you know, the fact that people are too proud. He's lamenting the fact that people are too, you know, there's a song on the album called Disease of Conceit. Anyway, Where Teardrops Fall has the best sort of 80s production. It's not bad at all. Man in the Long Black Coat has a hint of the croakier voice that Dylan would develop in the next decade. Most of the Time, great love song, one of the more underrated of his career. Disease of Conceit is a flashback to you know, the Christian era, despairing at the general state of society. Shooting Star, the closer, great little song as he catches the sight of a shooting star and has some brief remembrances of any number of things. You can kind of see him. He catches the shooting star, thinks back to his ex-wife, thinks on his muses on his Christianity, thinks about all sorts of little things. It's just a song about a passing thought. Now, in the great pantheon of Dylan, this is only a quote-unquote minor album in the same sort of class as something like New Morning, probably, but it's still really good. And I suspect if you really get into Oh Mercy, it's an album that you'll come back to again and again. Now, like I said, because people are less familiar with this era of Dylan, I'm going to try to be playing like bits of it, right? Let me see what Dylan, you know, what is on there. Let's see if Disease of Conceit is on there. Let's try to play that maybe. Bloody hell, it's not on there. Why is Disease of Conceit not on YouTube? I mean, it's just insane. What is on YouTube? Let's have a look. Okay, somebody's put the full album of okay, for some reason somebody's no, it's a live version. It's no good. Damn it. What about Everything Is Broken? Is that on YouTube? No. What the hell? Okay, I'm going to go to Bob Dylan's official YouTube channel, see what from Oh Mercy is included on there. Because it's nuts. They just take everything down, you know, from anywhere on the internet, apart from what's on their own channel, but they don't upload anything. Let's have a look. Give me a moment, folks. I need to play bits of okay, what about Most of the Time? It's an alternate version. Actually Insane. Dreaming of You. That's an outtake. Oh man. Okay, well, all right. First of all, I accused Dylan of sounding like a stuffed pig on Empire Burlesque, right? let's have a little listen to some of the Empire Burlesque so you can see what I'm talking about. This is some Stuffed Pig 1985, Dylan. Yeah. I've never actually seen this video, by the way.
Well, I had to move fast, and I couldn't with
Oh my God.
you around my neck. I said I'd send for you, and I did. What did you expect? My hands are sweaty, and we haven't even
Hideous, hideous t-shirt.
started yet. I go along with the charade until I can think my way out. I know it was all a big joke, whatever it was all about.
So yeah, there's the Stuffed Pig, Dylan, of Empire Burlesque. But let me see if I can find anything at all from Oh Mercy on the entirety of YouTube. It's just insane. What's this alternate version of Most of the Time? Let's have a look at this. No, it's no good. All right. So nothing on his official channel from Oh Mercy. What about this? No, it's all Man in the Long Black Coat. Look, that's on there. Okay, we'll have to do Man in the Long Black Coat on the basis that it's the only bloody song from Oh Mercy they've allowed on YouTube. So let's play a bit of Man in the Long Black Coat. You'll see what I mean. Like, you can hear he's a bit older, and you know the first kind of I guess echoes of the kind of croakier later Dylan is on No Mercy. You'll hear it here. Takes forever to start this song, doesn't it?
Crickets are chirping, the water is high. There's a soft cotton dress on the line, hanging dry. The windows wide open, African trees bent over backwards from a hurricane breeze.
Okay, that'll do. I just wanted to give you a flavour of the sound of Oh Mercy because it's somewhat different from a lot of his other albums. Okay, so let us move on now to the 1990s. We've made it. We're only an hour and 40 minutes in. Can I get to the end? I doubt it, but let's carry on. So let's go now to Under the Red Sky, which is possibly one of his least remembered albums, but let's get this one up. Under the Red Sky. And what did I write 10 years ago? Ever the unpredictable enigma. So this was from 1990, Under the Red Sky. Ever the unpredictable enigma. Dylan promptly stamped all over the goodwill that he has built up on Oh Mercy by releasing this impossibly light and flimsy album, which featured a host of star cameos, including Elton John, Slash, George Harrison, Al Cooper, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and get this, David Crosby. And this album features a song called Wiggle Wiggle, which is every bit as stupid as it sounds. The production is a step backwards towards the clean slickness of Slow Train Coming. The lyrics are still very list-based, but now Dylan is making things even more formulaic by drawing on nursery rhymes throughout. There is one really good song here called Born in Time, but there is a much better version of Born in Time on the Bootleg series. In fact, the same is true of many of the songs here. God Knows on the Bootleg series is quite awesome. You'll find it on Volume 8, Telltale Signs. The problem with Under the Red Sky is not that it's bad, it's a really enjoyable album to give a spin or two. The problem that it is so light and inconsequential, there is nothing to come back for. It has no lasting power. It's a sugar puff of an album, which may well be what Dylan intended. So nothing much to write home about for Under the Red Sky. I mean, tell me if you disagree with any of my takes, by the way. I mean, maybe you love Under the Red Sky. Tell me why though, because I just think it's not a stayer. You get albums that grow on you and albums that just kind of, there's never any reason to go back there. All right. So what else have we got? Okay, we're coming up now to a new kind of rebirth, I guess, because now we've got Good As I've Been to You from 1992. And again, like, you may be quite into Dylan, but maybe you've never given like any of these slightly lesser known albums a shot. Like Good As I've Been to You is pretty like off the beaten path, I would say, for most people, but there's some really good stuff on there. So let's see what I wrote about Good As I've Been to You 10 years ago. Speaking of unpredictable, so this was released in 1992, by the way, and you can see that he was kind of unshaven and drifting a little bit in the early 90s here. Speaking of unpredictable, after more than a decade of churning out these slickly produced albums, with this album, Dylan went down to his garage with an acoustic guitar and went back to basics to record his own versions of old folk songs, some of which were fairly obscure. So in a strange way, this is like a sequel to the very first album, Bob Dylan, from all the way back in 1962. Although he didn't write any of these songs, this sounds like his most intimate and personal album since Blood on the Tracks. And with the benefit of hindsight, we can see that this was like a rebirth for him as an artist. He had to kind of go and reconnect with the material that inspired him to become an artist in the first place, which is a lot of the Delta blues standards of the 30s, a lot of traditional folk songs. This album and its successor were both important for me in acting as a kind of gateway to some of the awesome 1920s and 30s folk artists that Dylan is covering here. For example, he mentions in the liner notes, and the liner notes to these albums, Good As I've Been to You and World Gone Wrong, are really good because Dylan writes them himself, and he's kind of got a particular way of writing. He mentions the Mississippi Sheiks in the liner notes of World Gone Wrong. And then I found out that Sitting on Top of the World on this album was by the Mississippi Sheiks too. I remember back before the internet made finding anything easy, traipsing around Cardiff, trying to find a single music shop that even had the Mississippi Sheiks on their system. Not in the shop, on their system, period. It's worth listening to their version of Sitting on Top of the World, by the way, because it's incredible. In fact, maybe YouTube will have Mississippi Sheiks Sitting on Top of the World. Let's have a look. Mississippi Sheiks. This is the other reason that Dylan is incredibly valuable, by the way, as a gateway into getting into stuff like this. So let me play Mississippi Sheiks, Sitting on Top of the World, one of my favorite songs of all time. And I want to say it's from like 1928, but you may want to double check the date on that. So this is one of the songs that he covers on this album, and it really is a gateway back to the world of this sort of material. So this is the Mississippi Sheiks.
Was all the summer and all the fall, just trying to find my little all in all. But now she's gone, I don't worry. I'm sitting on top of the world. Was in the spring, one summer day, just when she left me, she's good to stay. But now she's gone, I don't worry. I'm sitting on top of the world.
So I won't play any more of that, but yeah, I do love that song. So Dylan's version of that, by the way, his version of Sitting on Top of the World is not all bad either. Now, his voice is notably altered here. It's getting more worn now, not yet croaky, but he's showing serious signs of age. And in my view, it's not a detriment. It adds a great deal to these songs. Dylan's guitar playing retains some of the punkish energy we find on his debut. And there are some really great songs here. Blackjack Davy, Little Maggie, Tomorrow Night, You're Gonna Quit Me, Diamond Joe. This is just terrific stuff. And it feels like the real Dylan, like he'd just be doing this stuff if he was left on his own to his own devices and wasn't releasing it to the world. This is like what he gets up to in his own time, basically. And it's great. Johnny Cash's late American recordings are correctly given a lot of praise, but for some reason this amazing album is still slept on, perhaps because Cash was never a great writer and critics aren't willing to heap praise on a Dylan album that Dylan didn't write himself. Maybe, but I honestly think Dylan is one of the great interpreters of the American blues and folk traditions. He's very good at interpreting the material and also kind of giving you a gateway into it as well. I learned so much from those Cash American recordings too, because you kind of go back and you learn, especially the first one of those albums, when he's not covering like U2 and Nine Inch Nails and so on, but he's covering like Merle Haggard and Tennessee Ernie Ford, whoever he's covering on there. You find your way back to some of those old standards that way. Dylan does the same thing. This is another entry point. You could start your exploration of late Dylan here. If you're a fan of Dylan but you've never actually bothered to go past the 80s, for example, this album, Good As I've Been to You, is a very good starting point. His voice is in transition, and the material is great. So let me see if there's anything from Good As I've Been to You on YouTube. Maybe they're a bit less kind of censorious when it comes to this sort of material, but no, basically it's all. Let's have a look. It looks like the title track is on there. Can't find it. Darn it. I mean, there is something from World Gone Wrong, so at the very least I can play that. Blackjack Davy. No, not on there at all. So there we go. We're going to have to just have the clip "Blood on My Eyes" from World Gone Wrong. So let me just get up the World Gone Wrong cover. We'll talk about World Gone Wrong, and then maybe we'll have a little listen to the title track. Okay, so I don't know what it is about Dylan on YouTube. Somebody's going to have to explain that to me, because every other artist is on there, but not him. Okay, so World Gone Wrong, recorded in 1994, is more of the same, really. It's very much a kind of companion piece to Good As I've Been to You. Only legend has it that Dylan recorded this on a cassette tape and then sent that cassette tape to Columbia. So it actually has some distortion in places. And that crackle and poor audio quality from actually just recording on a cassette tape, in my view, actually enhances things. Also, Dylan's liner notes were truly educational for someone with no previous exposure to pre-war American folk music. Dylan's voice is even more world-weary here, and even a little ghostly, even eerie in places. And again, to me, that serves to enhance the material. And I think this about Johnny Cash as well. I actually like these artists when they're older, because it sounds like they're talking from experience. It sounds like they're living. They're coming from a kind of a life lived hard type thing, rather than a young man who can't possibly know these things. So it definitely means something different when Johnny Cash talks about his demons versus some 18-year-old punk talking about it, right? And Dylan's the same. I think his song choices are better on this album than on Good As I've Been to You, where a lot of those songs were up tempo. These are all more kind of contemplative and contain more vivid imagery. Blood in My Eyes is a great example. That doesn't mean that Bob can't still take it up a notch and give us he gives us an impassioned rendition of Blind Willie McTell's Broke Down Engine at one point. Delia, with its refrain of all the friends I've ever had are gone, just a heartbreaking song. Brilliant recording, Delia. One of my all-time favorite Dylan tracks, Two Soldiers, tells the tale of two soldiers going off to war with only one of them coming back. It's just fantastic. Like John Wesley Harding, World Gone Wrong it's one of those albums that always seems like you're the only person on earth who's listening to it. Lost songs from a forgotten age being sung by this eerie, ghostly voice through cassette quality audio. Just a masterpiece. Probably Dylan's most underrated album, period. By which I mean nobody ever talks about World Gone Wrong, and yet it's easily like a 5-star effort, just completely slept on from what I can see in the criticism that I've read. So with all of that said, let me play Blood on My Eyes, one of the few Dylan songs with an actual video on YouTube, and it's got an actual video as well, like an actual video with him in it. So let's here's Blood in My Eyes.
Woke up this morning feeling blue. Seen a good-looking girl, can I make love with you? Hey, hey, babe, I got blood in my eyes for you. Hey, hey, babe, I got blood in my eyes for you.
There's some very funny comments, by the way, in the on YouTube, because at various points he's like signing autographs and like taking pictures and things like that. And there are people in the YouTube comments who are like, luckiest person in the world, or imagine having that picture and things like that. But anyway, let's carry on.
I got blood in my eyes for you, baby. I don't care what in the world you do. I went back home, put on my hey, babe, I got blood in my eyes for you. Hey, hey, babe, I got blood in my eyes for you.
So yeah, World Gone Wrong, Stone Cold classic album that nobody ever talks about. So let's carry on now, because that is not true of Time Out of Mind, which is another Stone Cold classic album, but people do very much talk about this one. So I'm just going to get it up. Time Out of Mind from 1997. We're doing quite well, folks, although we're running out of time. So how far we get. This might be a good place to stop, actually, Time Out of Mind. But let's get up the front cover. Here's what I wrote 10 years ago on this one. And yes, I've just remembered to open Entropy. I completely forgot about that earlier on, but I've opened it now if anybody wants to, super chat in there. Okay, so for this album, widely touted as a comeback from those foolish critics who had ignored Good As I've Been to You and World Gone Wrong, Dylan brought back the producer Daniel Lanois, who was able to harness the new ghostly quality of our aging hero's voice to stunning effect. This would be the place that the late period of Dylan's career starts in earnest. So if you want to divide up Dylan's career, you'd say there's the early Dylan, the kind of folk protest singer, there's the kind of peak or kind of hipster poet era of the late 60s. There's the kind of the period where he goes to the country farm and kind of withdraws for a while on New Morning kind of area. Then there's what I would describe as the mature or middle period Dylan, starting with Blood on the Tracks, that kind of era. Then there's the Christian stuff. Then there's kind of lost 80s Dylan, kind of in no man's land. And now really we're getting into what you could call late Dylan. But late Dylan, I mean, I'm going to make a very controversial statement, right? If Bob Dylan didn't have anything before Time Out of Mind, and you just took his career from Time Out of Mind to Rough and Rowdy Ways, so anything he's recorded since 1997, I'd say Dylan would still have a claim to be like one of the greatest artists of all time, just based on the output from then. Okay, which is not to take anything away from his 60s, 70s, 80s output, right? But just that, it's as good as anything he's ever done. And this is something that I think is a dividing line between people who are really into Dylan and people who just kind of treat him as another artist type thing, because his late material is very, very good in a way that is not really true of many of his contemporaries. I'm trying to think, like Paul McCartney's got a few decent late albums after a long period of rubbish. Like late McCartney's quite good. Johnny Cash has got a good late period as well, as we talked about. But this is also something, though, that also elevates Dylan above a lot of other people. The very fact that he's got a discernible and quality late period makes me think of him like W.B. Yeats has got an early period and a middle period and a late period, right? Or Picasso or someone like that. And Dylan has got a late period. It's got very distinctive style and tone. Anyway, it starts with Time Out of Mind. So he's now adapting his rugged, ragged voice to enhance these songs of mortality, pain, regret, and increasing disillusionment. The retreat to pre-war acoustic blues and folk seemed to have rejuvenated Dylan, the songwriter, who really hits it out of the park here with his strongest suite of songs in a very long time. And by that, I mean, this is a better album than Oh Mercy, for example, which is a great album. But this is like an all-time, good Dylan album, this one. Lovesick is by turns terse and biting, then lonely and desperate. moving quickly from bitter hatred and regret to yearning and remorse. It sets the tone for the album. A man unsure of himself, coming to terms with being old, who can't quite decide if he's done with women or if he wants to keep on giving it a shot. It's obvious that he's been dumped recently, as you can hear on Standing in the Doorway. Million Miles make it fairly explicit. At times, he's feeling down and out and resigned to it. On trying to get to heaven, he may even be willing death to come to him. You know, he's had enough. This all reaches a breaking point on the towering song "Not Dark Yet," where he's almost completely bereft of hope and is close to giving up completely. And on that song, he sings, "I was born here and I'll die here against my will. I know it looks like I'm moving, but I'm standing still. Every nerve in my body is so vacant and numb. I can't even remember what it was I came here to get away from. Don't even hear a murmur of a prayer. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. Someone isn't very happy. Dylan is seldom more despairing than he is on this album. But just when it seems that everything is lost, Cold Irons Bound comes crashing in. And although the message is more or less the same, that he's been left hurt and with a sense of nothingness after losing this woman or that woman, the tone changes from resignation to defiance and a refusal to give up. I tried to love and protect you because I cared. I'm going to remember forever the joy we shared. Incidentally, I much prefer the rockier version of Cold Irons Bound that can be found on the Masked and Anonymous soundtrack, mainly because I think it brings out his refusal to lie down more on there. And this is one song on which I think Daniel Lanois' atmospheric production is a hindrance rather than an enhancement. On Make You Feel My Love, which has since been covered by Adele of all people, and has become like a standard on as a result of Adele's covering it. You then find like kids doing like Make You Feel My Love on X Factor and stuff, which is fucking mental if you ask me. But anyway, on Make You Feel My Love, there's one last desperate cry of love. And although many have criticized it for so-called sentimentalized postcard lyrics, I think it's a really lovely song. And then there's Can't Wait, which is the first song on which Dylan is really pushing his new voice in interesting ways. You know, at one point he just growls, the air burns. So that's like almost when he sings the air burns on Can't Wait. That's the birth of like Love and Theft Dylan right there. As he moves through this desolate landscape of grey skies and graveyards condemned to a purgatory of loving a woman he's lost forever. Finally, there's Highlands, a 16-minute epic closer on which he shows a welcome lighter side after the general gloominess that pervades the rest of this album. The humour is jet black and the tone resigned, distant, beyond caring. He says, I feel like I'm drifting from scene to scene. I got new eyes. Everything looks far away. Here's a typically fed-up stanza from Highlands. Insanity is smashing up against my soul. You can say I was on anything but a roll. If I had a conscience, well, I might just blow my top. What would I do with it anyway? Maybe take it to a pawn shop. You know, he's talking about pawning his own conscience away. This is a mode for Dylan. It's a song that he couldn't have written as a young man. And he would go on to perfect it, in my view, on a song that does not appear on this album, but on the Wonder Boys soundtrack, Things Have Changed. Incidentally, a song for which he also won an Oscar. And I'd recommend giving that a whirl once you're done with Time Out of Mind, the first of his late masterpieces. And what I think I'm going to do here is I'm going to play that song, Things Have Changed, because I think it really does capture his kind of late 90s mood very well. And then I'm going to play the live version of Cold Irons Bound, because I've seen that at least it's on here. We're going to play a bit of that as well. so that you can kind of see the general vibe, I guess. So let's have a bit of Things Have Changed. In my view, one of the best songs he's ever written, period. So here's Things Have Changed. You won an Oscar for this. Listen to the lyrics if you can. So you can just pay attention, listen to what he's saying, as well as looking at the swirling images. All right.
A worried man with a worried mind. No one in front of me and nothing behind. There's a woman on my lap and she's drinking champagne. Got white skin, got assassin's eyes. I'm looking up into the sapphire tinted skies. I'm wild dressed, waiting on the last train.
I mean, let's just pause to consider the lyrics here. Okay, so Times Have Changed by Dylan. I'll just get the lyrics up because I'll just read the lyrics there to just make sure that you're catching what he's saying. A worried man with a worried mind, nothing in front of me, nothing behind. There's a woman on my lap and she's drinking champagne. Got white skin, blood in my eyes. I'm looking up into the sapphire tinted skies. I'm well dressed, waiting on the last train. I mean, this is phenomenal writing. I mean, it's kind of it captured every line. There's this sense in which Ezra Pound has got a book called The ABC of Reading, where he talks about concrete imagery and how it's possible to pack a lot of things into each line so that the person who's listening to it or the person who's reading it is able to be transported. That they're there, you're there, you understand what sort of scene this is. Anyway, let's carry on.
Standing on the gallows with my head in the news.
And this is a great feature of late Dylan. Head in the news. He just goes. It's got that kind of Vincent Price range that he finds. And I really love late Dylan voice. I mean, people say, well, he can't sing. I mean, to me, this is the singer he should have always been. Anyway, let's carry on.
Any minute now, I'm expecting all hell to break loose. People are crazy and times are strange. I'm locked in tight, I'm out of range. I used to care, but things have changed.
I mean, it's only just occurred to me, but he's kind of talking about the clear pill in a way. I used to care, but things have changed, Let's carry on.
This place ain't doing me any good. I'm in the wrong town. I said there in Hollywood. Just for a second there, I thought I saw something move. Gonna take dancing lessons to the jitterbug rag. Ain't no shortcuts. Gonna dress in drag. Only a fool here would think he's got anything to prove.
Okay, so that was Things Have Changed. Again, among the best songs he's ever written. I mean, I don't know how he's written so many amazing songs, but that one would have to be up there. It's got that Tangled Up in Blue quality, where it's like a living painting in a way. But I also just love the kind of fed up, world weary speaker. A guy who's just had enough, basically. Yes, and there's just some just amazing lines. I've been walking 40 miles of bad road. If the Bible is right, the world will explode. I've been trying to get as far away from myself as I can. some things are too hot to touch. The human mind can only stand so much. You can't win with a losing hand. And this is another feature of his late writing, which I think is almost a kind of evolution into his final form, okay? Which is that each of these lines, do you remember I was talking about the killer one-liner, that he's great at the killer one-liner? It's like he's found this mode of writing where every single line is kind of that killer one-liner on its own, and they're kind of disconnected in a way. So it's like that those 6 lines that I just they can each stand on their own, and they each tell a story on their own, and they kind of impressionistically, it's like he's kind of shuffling cards. You can pick out any one of them, and each one of them is interesting on its own, and then you put them all together, and it's like, well, so it's a very interesting songwriting technique in my view. So the other song I want to play here is let me make sure I'm still up and running. The other song I want to play here is actually from the Masked and Anonymous soundtrack, and it's the version of Cold Irons Bound. Okay, now this is a song that was on I think Time Out of Mind from 1997, but this actually lays us up very nicely to talk about late Dylan, and I'm afraid I'm out of time here. So for Love and Theft all the way to Rough and Rowdy Ways, there's going to have to be a part 3 because I just don't have the time. But I think this sets us up nicely for that period because, unless I'm mistaken, Time Out of Mind is the last time that Dylan used an outside producer. All of his albums after that point are produced by a gentleman by the name of Jack Frost, which is simply a pseudonym for Dylan himself. And the Jack Frost technique is to use basically no tricks at all, no studio tricks, to basically try to capture the essence of his live band. And at this point, I think the Neverending Tour had been going on something like 10 years. So Dylan's band were incredibly tight, and they are. I mean, even now, his band, continue to be incredibly tight. But his band of this period were especially like a very well-honed unit. And Dylan's idea for production was basically that he just wanted to put a microphone, have the microphone there in the room and to capture the sound of the live performance. So from Love and Theft onwards, that's the basic technique used on the production. And I think this performance of Cold Irons Bound actually captures something of the spirit of that. So, but it also demonstrates why Cold Irons Bound itself is such a phenomenal song. So let's listen to Cold Irons Bound. And then I may have to make a call as to whether we call it a day or try to persevere until the very end there. But okay, so here's Cold Irons Bound, Masked and Anonymous soundtrack, originally on Time Out of Mind, but here's a live performance of it that was included on this soundtrack. So let's go for it. I should mention, by the way, that this is also one of my favorite Dylan looks. With the sly little moustache and the kind of the cowboy hat and this kind of image that he's got here. I think this is the performer that he always wanted to be. Somebody who's able to stand in a club, deliver a kind of snide one-liner, nod and a wink. I mean, this is the song and dance man, and this is really his Love and Theft persona. That pretty much is the dominant persona of his late period. So even though Time Out of Mind is a classic, the character of Time Out of Mind is a bit gloomy compared to this more jaunty figure. So, and he's more defiant as well. Let's watch this performance.
I'm beginning to hear voices. There's no one around. I'm all used up, and I feel some turned round. I went to church on Sunday. A sheep passed by. My love for her taking such a long time to die. And I'm waist deep in the mirrors. It's almost like I don't even exist.
Something else I want to say here as well. Now, again, a lot of people who are conventionally minded were like, "Well, what is this? Like, this is what he's not singing. Like, what is this?" I actually really like this voice that he's got here. This the one that he had for most of the 2000s. Nobody else in the history of the world sings like this. It's a kind of completely unique style that he's developed from, decades of touring non-stop and smoking and being Bob Dylan. And there's something about his delivery of things and the way he's able to use this tool. The way he goes up on some lines and the way he goes down on some lines, and I actually really like this voice. And I do get a bit irritated when I hear that criticism, especially from like Guardian journalists and random people and so on. So I get a bit defensive about this version of Dylan because I just think he's like I keep on saying, the ultimate form of him. But let's carry on.
I'm 20 miles out of town, cold bell. 20 miles out of town, in a cold bell. And the more the pride, the higher the wall. You can't see over to the other side. Such a sad thing. CBD decay. It's sad as now to feel your heart torn away. But look at you, and I'm out of control. Like the universe has swallowed me whole. I'm 20 miles out of town in Coda and bound.
Notice, by the way, the camera's not moving, static. This is something else as well, where this is the first time really that Dylan takes control over a lot of the production processes. Notice how in that 80s song, he was so uncomfortable. He didn't look like uncomfortable in his own skin. Here, he's fully in. You can see the confidence, and you can see the fact that he's happy in this environment. And this is something else I think that people should understand about the late. I honestly think the late Dylan finds himself in a way, and starts to take control over a lot of these little decisions and things that previously some production company or management person would have taken for him. Now he's like, right, no, I'm Bob Dylan. I'm going to do it this way. So this is another reason why it's just something else to think about.
20 miles out of town, in Coda and bound. There's too many people, too many to recall. I thought some of them were fake tonight. I was wrong about them all. Well, the road is rocky, the hillside is smooth. Up over my head, a thunderclouds of blue. I found my world in you. But your love hasn't proved true. I'm 20 miles out of town in Coda and bound. 20 miles out of town in Coda and bound.
Okay, that'll do us. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on here, whether we can wrap this up or whether we're going to have to go to a part 3. Yeah, what have we got left here? Because we've basically wrapped up the 90s and we've just got 2 decades left. No, there's too much to get through. Okay, there's going to have to be a part 3, folks, especially if there's super chats and things. Let me have a look in the entropy. I can see that Coca-Cola has come in with an entropy. I won't do part 3 next week. We'll do something else. In fact, next week I want to do reviews of Leon Herring's Bible sketches with Lambda, because I just think it will be hilarious. But at some point we'll come back to Dylan, and yes, yeah, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. I mean, I love Love and Theft, and I love the late period, and there's a lot to say. Okay, so I can't really skip over those albums like I skipped over you know, some of those late 80s albums, for example. There's just too much to say, so I'll easily fill an hour and a half, 2 hours of late, you know, of late Dylan. Coca-Cola says, you may call me Tui, you may call me Tenny, you may call me Vladdy, you may call me Lenny, you may call me Velvet Club, you may call me AA, you may call me anything. No matter what you say, still you're going to have to serve somebody. Well, it may be Mr. Fence, or it may be Mr. Forbidden Text Author, but you're going to have to serve somebody. So there we go from Coca-Cola there. Very clever, sir. And I'll just have a look to see if there's been any super chats. Like I said, I'm not really doing these, not doing this sort of stream for money, just for the love of the people who really wanted me to finish. There's just been the one super chat. That crime guy says, would Morcar be happy with the reviews of his Edgar series? I'm interested in reviewing these on our live stream series on Proper Horror Show channel. Yes, that crime guy. I think he's eager for people to do reviews. I heard Charlemagne and John D may be reviewing the series. I'd love to see what other people make of those movies. I mean, Morcar is an evil genius and he's got a twisted mind. So to see what other people think would be certainly interesting. I did note on Twitter there was a whole thread basically where Morcar was trying to explain himself and so on. So you can, if you are going to do it, be sure to. That's a good resource basically, because you can kind of get it straight from the director's mouth what he was thinking. So there you go. Any other questions or comments before I get out of here? I'll just have a look at the. I'll just have a look at the actual live chat to see if anyone else has any questions while I'm here. Just type it in. You don't have to super chat or anything. While I'm here, let's have a look. No questions. Excellent. So we'll see you next time on part 3. Hope people appreciate these streams. Let me know in the comments. And time to get out.